Hey, what's up, Station? I'm Sky, and today is an opinion piece on the new MMO coming out called Swordsman Online. Basically, it's going to be a compare and contrast of current MMOs that are in the genre that this game is launching for, and just other MMOs and games. So we're going to see what this game has that's similar, what's different, stuff like that. It's going to be my opinion on what I think the mechanics are going to be, how the game is going to play out, and it's also going to be just, is it going to be good, is it going to be bad? It's going to be a little bit detailed here, so sit tight and let's get into it.
FreeMMOstation.com.
Yeah, alright, so one of the first things that we need to talk about is the origination of the game. Where is this game coming from? Oh, well, it's an Eastern game, and it's based on a popular novel, apparently. So very similar to the game Yule Gang 2, which is based on a manhwa, this one is based on a novel, and it's probably going to have a really interesting lore. There's probably going to be lots of cutscenes, it's probably going to get players emotionally involved, and hopefully that's going to still connect with the Western audience, but it's certainly going to be big with the Eastern audience. What we want is just a little bit more originality. We want some lore that deviates from the normal sort of questing and different, things like that. If you played an MMO, you kind of understand. You skip a whole lot. Basic storyline premises are all there, good, evil, whatever. Some games deviate a little bit, and hopefully since this does come from an original novel, we will get that deviation that we want. But yeah, from the trailers, we can see that this game is going to be high fantasy. So expect monsters and magic, while it's going to still have a more realistic approach to the characters and the world. Apparently, we are going to be interacting with a lot of characters that are going to have a lot of, character. And the world looks really nice. It does look a bit more realistic. It's not going for a too cartoony or comic look, so even though it is going to be kung fu and high fantasy, I'm glad that it's still taking that approach. But let's take a look at the big picture here. Where does the player fit in? What is our role as players? Oh, well, apparently we are actually a very important character from the very beginning, as we can see from one of the trailers, is that we are actually a guard of a town, and then the town gets decimated, and then we are saved by a mysterious person who we're going to assume is a hero. And then we are given a second chance to redeem ourselves, and then as well, we become a part of this big involved story. So we are an instrument of this main overarching story, but apparently also Swordsman Online is going to give us a lot of choice within this story. We're going to have factions, NPC factions, and that will probably dictate some quests and things like that. But as far as it goes with the multiplayer aspect, because it is an MMO, they have a big emphasis on guild play, apparently. There's going to actually even be guild territories, things that you can conquer as a guild, and there's going to be PvP arenas as well. So, well, now that we're talking about it, let's just segue into combat, since pretty much that's all we know. All we know is that this game is going to be a crazy martial arts, high fantasy, epic MMO. And, well, all the trailers are just pretty much showing off combat. And let's talk about it. What's going to make it different? How's it the same? How is it going to affect gameplay? Stuff like that. All right, so how is the combat in this game different? Well, it seems that abilities actually can interact with each other, and seemingly they're multi-layered and they can be comboed. But that also kind of means that they can be countered halfway through. And this is actually really interesting. We see this in the gameplay. So similar to Age of Wushu, it's probably going to have a more strategic combat system. But I think from also the trailer, we can see that it's also very mobile, very big, dramatic, and very, very spectacle with its fights. So it's probably going to be similar to Yule Gang 2. And I think the combat overall is going to be a mesh between Age of Wushu and Yule Gang 2. So yeah, it appears that the game will have a huge variety of abilities as well. From the trailer, we just see like a lot of different things that you can do, and that adds a lot of strategy and also just flavor to the fights. So I think the game is just going to be fun, especially if you're more in tune with like your strategy side. So if you're not a fan of, say, Dragon Nest or World of Warcraft, where you're either hacking and slashing or just spamming spells, this is a little bit more strategic, but it still has that impactful action that you are looking for. But how is the combat the same? How is this the same in some other games? Like I said, it's similar to Age of Wushu, very similar to Yule Gang 2, which are both going to be free-to-play MMOs, and they are both extremely similar aesthetically as well. So there are classes also, so just in consideration to other MMOs, there are going to be classes in this game. Classes are involved in the game, and its combat mechanics, for the most part, have been done before. I mean, it does run on a new engine, the Angelica 3, which is by Perfect World, so it's probably going to have some in-house effects that are just really good. It's probably going to run very well, and I think the combat will have a tinge of originality that you don't get in Age of Wushu or Yule Gang 2. I think it's going to be a mix of the two, and I think it's going to be a really good mixing. But it's nothing new, really. It's nothing like Guild Wars 2 has a really nice combat system. It's nothing like Terra, because Terra was really big and it's really popular because of how action-oriented it is. It's nothing that new, but I think it is going to be solid. But yes, there are classes, and but that's not the only dictation of skills, though. Similar to Age of Wushu, depending on your martial arts school that you choose, you can also pick up new skills to mesh in with your class. So maybe similar to Elder Scrolls Online, we could see some extra skills being slotted in and traded out depending on some different choices that the player can make. Maybe like crafting skills and stuff like that. We can actually get different passives and entire skills and abilities. That'd be really interesting. So how will this affect gameplay? How is this combat going to be for the overall game? Well, combat seems to be a mix of standstill and action combat, with movement being a huge key factor in combat, but each ability seems to root the player in place. So if you watch the trailers closely, you can actually see them not freely moving around. So similar to Terra and dissimilar to World of Warcraft, you will not just be able to roam and freely move. So in Guild Wars 2, you can just freely move, do abilities, stuff like that, but in games like Terra, Age of Wushu, you have to, some spells just kind of root you in place, or they move you themselves. But luckily, it seems that a lot of abilities seem to have mobility attached to them, so maybe you'll do flips and do crazy air combos and stuff just by comboing the different abilities, so they move you. Combat will likely be more strategy focused, with an emphasis on countering, so kind of rock, paper, scissors, E. So while it may feel sticky, much like when you first started playing a new MOBA, I think experienced players will likely be able to maneuver about more freely, and hopefully if they do this right, because they are using an in-house engine, they can probably tune it just correctly so that it doesn't feel sticky. So while some spells, like I said, they do root you in place, however, a game like Terra, it doesn't quite feel that sticky. It actually feels pretty good when you play Terra, even though you are rooted and you can't freely move. Hopefully they can do the same. They are using an in-house engine, and I think they can pull it off. So, who's going to enjoy this kind of combat? Like I said before, if you're kind of bored of World of Warcraft, because you do just kind of spam spells, and if you played Dragon Nest, you might have liked it maybe, but it's just a little bit too hack and slashy. I think this game is going to be for you. Like, if you want more strategy, it's going to be more impactful gameplay. So even though there might be overall less action, I think it's just more important. It's a more meaningful choice. And also, if you're a fan of turn-based RPGs, maybe you're a Final Fantasy, or there's a lot of turn-based MMOs that are actually really good, like Atlantica and stuff. So if you're a fan of those games, I think you're going to like the transition to this game, because it does add all that strategy that you have loved, but also with the extra action that you normally don't get. But let me ask the question, when are we actually going to be fighting? In a lot of Eastern games, most of the time we're just kind of spent questing, reading and gathering, stuff like that. Stuff that mediocre MMOs do often, and it's really popular in Eastern games. It's a little bit grindy. So when are we actually going to be fighting? Well, assuming that the trailers are accurate, it seems that this game's going to have a pretty big focus on PvP, and they're going to have features where you can guild conquest, okay? You can actually take over territories, and also they seem to be really big with the PvP arenas. So assuming that that is pretty much like the main gameplay focus, then we're probably going to be showing off our Kung Fu skills all the time, which is totally fine with me. But assuming that this game is actually going to be similar to its Eastern brothers and sisters, there's probably going to be a really big emphasis on trading and crafting and stuff like that. However, on the website, you don't really see much information on that. While we do know that players will be able to further customize their character through crafting, say maybe crafting armor, stuff like that, dyes, who knows, it is safe to assume that Swordsman Online will take a similar approach to crafting like other Eastern games, and it's probably going to be integral to the gameplay. Even though from the trailers it's just combat, we really have no idea how crafting is going to work in this game, if it's going to be extremely standard, if it's going to be entirely unique, we don't know. We have to assume that it's going to be extremely similar to other games and be nothing special, but still an integral part of the game. But on a note about that, so if the materials, what we need to craft, say weapons and stuff like that, if those materials are open world available and easily gathered by anybody, say like a game like World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2, where you can pretty much easily get ores and stuff like that, and you have the marketplace and stuff where you can just buy it, the auction house, I think that the crafting, it just kind of loses its poignancy. It doesn't become fun, and the economy's not that, it's not as fun or integral to actual meaningful gameplay then. It's just, grinding and stuff like that. But if the materials are actually hard and difficult to get to, say we're talking about a game like RuneScape or EVE Online, where things are actually really difficult to get and to make a business of, then the economy is going to be really good. And since, you know, it's just this is under the assumption that it's going to be similar to Eastern games where there's a lot of crafting and stuff like that, I think that it could do really well. So if it's similar to Monster Hunter, where there's a lot of materials that you have to actually like really work for, it could be really awesome. And since they are mentioning that guild conquest can take over territories, and there's going to be certain resources and things like that, buffs maybe, that could be allocated to those territories, and then you conquer it, that might be really awesome. So say one certain area has just a lot of iron ore, and so whoever owns this is going to have like a huge monopoly on, you know, getting this ore, and they're just going to make a lot of money from it. I think that's awesome. I think that could really work. But if that's not how it is, and if the rest of the game is just sort of standardized, well, then the game's going to have to be carried on its combat, which I'm a little bit afraid of, because in the trailers, that's kind of all we see. We just see the combat, and an MMO is not just its combat. Unless they wanted to, unless they made this game all about its combat. But then again, it's an MMO, so why would they make an MMO if they're not going to explore the features that a normal MMO would? Why wouldn't they just make it an arena game? So that's a little bit interesting. Basically, what I want from the game, I want it to be a little less floaty, a little less clunky, to be honest. So if the game is going to focus on combat, I just want it to feel good. I think the skill sets displayed were fantastic. You know, all the different skills, all the different spells, I guess. I think they look really good, and the promise of interactive combat is at least intriguing, probably to any player. And what I need from this game is I need it to succeed where other games in the genre fell short. I want deep but accessible PvP, and I want extremely challenging dungeons, like really hard dungeons that rely more on skill than equipment level. So in a lot of games, you just grind and then you beat stuff. I really want this game, since it is supposed to be strategic PvP, I want it to be strategic PvE as well. Talking about the story, I don't really care. Plot is always the last thing to consider, and it's the weakest part to any game fact. I'm afraid that being based off a novel, that they're going to over-romanticize the story instead of the world and the characters that make it so wonderful. So hopefully, as long as they focus on the true MMO aspect, you know, realizing this is an MMO game and nothing short of that, hopefully they can well round everything out. And so to be a successful MMO, they're going to need to give players the tools in order to create a successful story themselves. Anyways, if they continue to focus on player interaction with PvP and crafting, then it should do just fine. However, if they do the questing like usual games and produce generic dungeons, then I can't see this game going very far, at least in the West. But that's my opinion, guys, so thanks for sitting with me. 12 minutes? Wow, we've been here for a while, and thank you very much for listening. That's my opinion. Please leave in the comments what you think about this game. Links in the description for all the trailers and stuff. And yeah, the game does look exciting. Hopefully they pull through with all their promises. I'm Sky with Free MMO Station, and I'll see you guys again later. Bye-bye.